Yes, and we're live. Thank you and welcome everybody to the studio. Hope everybody's having a good evening. Well, it doesn't look like Twitch is having a good evening. I can't even load my own video coming back, but we shall see how things go. Of course, it's going to give me the adverts. You can't avoid the adverts, can you? Now then, let me move my trackball out of the way. That way I don't accidentally ban anybody or mute my microphone or anything similar. And I was going to tidy up my desk, wasn't I, before I started this stream? And I haven't. So I shall just get rid of some of these cottons because they will get covered in bits of bits of wood, shavings and things. And then they will get really hard to clean, so I shall just move those out of the way. I shall be back in a moment. Right, so at least we have some space in front of me in which I can at least, if nothing else, keep my cup of tea. Now I need two more things for this stream. I need some masking tape. Actually I need three more things, but I need some of this and I'll need my chisels, but I shall get those out in a moment. Right, and I need my block of wood. So the intention is to do the dragon that you see in the bottom left. So Lizard Soul, good evening. Webbo is Beast, good evening. Eddie Fall Guy, good evening. And 3D Bloke, also good evening. All of you, welcome to the studio this evening. That's fantastic to see you all. All here to see me fail at doing a dragon in relief carving. That's quite alright. So, now then, the intention is to do this one, and I'm going to trace down this. And I kind of need to put that there, you see. Now I've got to do artistic stuff because I've got to put the wing in and I've got to sort of work out rough. Yeah, I must be over that side. I'm actually going to have to draw something. Angelina Jaslyn, good evening. Welcome to the studio this evening. Hopefully everybody's getting a fairly decent copy of the stream. I noticed Twitch was having some problems serving me up my own video earlier on when I tried to go live. So I just stick that down to the top so that I'm going to do a trace down as it gets cold. Effectively using what is a carbon paper just to draw the outline, taking the easy way out. I could sit down and draw it, but then I wouldn't get onto the carving for quite some time, so we'll take this. This is Sorel paper, wax free, but I don't actually know what it contains. Coloured graphite. Okay, there you go. It's not quite the same thing as tracing paper. Tracing paper I think has got wax in it. If I fasten that down there like that, you see I can lift it up to take a look, because it doesn't matter where the paper goes, but it does mean that that always goes back down into the same position. So if I carry on tracing, it's always in the same place. Now then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a pencil for this. Could use a pen, but the pencil is what I happen to have to hand, and also whilst I could use a blunt instrument to do the tracing, it doesn't actually matter as far as the paper's concerned. If I do it with pencil, I can see where I've done. And I'm going to leave the fella out of it. That's Lord Jackson. I may or may not leave the finger out. We shall see when I get that far. I shall endeavour to leave it in, but may leave it out. Let's go roughly where the finger joints are. I don't need to be fantastically accurate in terms of this, because I'll do whatever looks right as I'm carving it. So this really is just kind of a working outline. Which just makes the start of it easier. Adding a few internal lines that will make life easier for later, like that. We'll see if we can get his scales in, or the neck ridges. Excuse me, I'm not looking at chat while I'm just doing that in case anybody's saying anything. Shall take a look in a moment. Looks like it's probably going to be a good enough outline. Yep, nice clear lines on there. I'll go, may need to go over it in pencil, but that shall do for now. That is the one you chose. No, it's not. You're right. There you go then. I'm wrong. Ah dear. I did like the one you chose. That's what I thought I was doing. It's not what I'm doing, but it's what I thought I was doing. So we shall do something about that. Thank you, Eddie. It never occurred to me. Yeah, dear. I thought that's what I picked up. You see, I'm going senile in my old age. Ah dear. Yeah, you sort of we worked our way to a choice of 2 this afternoon, and you picked one of them, and I was there busy doing the one that you rejected to start with. Ah dear. Blank canvas again. No, you see, not too late at all. Not too late at all. So we'll stick this one down. Same thing though, we'll just outline it all. Just shows you I should have looked up at chat earlier, shouldn't I? I may need to shorten his tail when I actually do this, because that's a very thin tail. At least I don't have to make my own wing up. You beat me to it, 84 guy. Yes, you beat me to it. I just said that, and of course you'd already read it in chat, and I hadn't read it first, I promise. Now, although I've put the eye in, that won't actually survive very long. And if I want to keep it there, what I'll actually have to do is keep drawing it in as I keep cutting away at material. And just drawing these arm and hand bones in. Again, this is just sort of reference, because as I cut material away, these lines will actually disappear quite quickly, and I will actually have to start redrawing them back in if I want to keep them. But we'll see how that turns out as I go on. I may just let them go and do it by eye later. So now then, does that look, that looks okay, so let's put a bit of the underlying material in. His hand is there. I think I'm going to leave the whole of the tree out actually. I don't particularly see any need to put that in, since the main idea is the dragon itself, so it needs something to perch on. So it sort of looks like it's standing there. It's resting on its own front hand or paw, so it's not like it's climbing up something that we need to show what it's climbing up. And we're going to leave the rider out of it as well. So there we go. Still a fair amount of material to remove, but we shall see. Yes, I will do. Good idea. It's still a reference picture, it's just not the one that I'm going to be using, but we shall update it. Plus I want the right reference one to look at as well, which is that one. Not that I'll be using it much at the early stage of carving. So let's put this transfer paper away. And then get the sharp stuff out. We are going to start with some chisels. Yeah, I don't know. Now that I've got a microphone, I've got nowhere to put the chisels, because they sit where the microphone's now sat. And now we make a big mess. And I get to drink my tea. So I shall put the reference over there so I can look at both. Start with a flat chisel so that I can create an outline, especially around some of these more delicate pieces, before I start carving away the background. This is so that if the wood splits as I'm carving the background, or anything basically runs towards a piece of wood I want to keep, in theory it should stop at the split. Sorry, stop at the cut that I've just made here, and won't go through into the wood that I want to keep, which is why this is generally called a stop cut. I think I'm going to enjoy carving this wood. Basswood is, or lime wood, European lime wood, same wood, different name, is a nice friendly wood to carve. Now I can't exactly get in there too easily. I'm just going to do a fairly large outer sort of outside cut and come back in with better chisels for the job a little bit later. If anybody's not seen carving or not heard the explanation before to do with this particular chisel, you may be looking at it and thinking that because of this bevel thing I'm using it backwards or upside down. I'm not using the flat plate bit of the blade against the line, and therefore you might think I'm doing it wrong. And whilst you may be right, I could easily be doing things wrong. I am using it that way on purpose, and that is because of the way the chisel works. As you push down, the bevel causes the blade to move away from the beveled edge. So if I drive this straight down like this, the chisel tends to move that way, which moves it away from the wood that I want to keep. If I turned it this way around to do the edge, it will tend to come in and undercut the wood I want to keep. And obviously I don't want to undercut the wood I want to keep because I want to keep it, which is why I use the chisel that way around. Sometimes you can't avoid it. In a moment in a little while I've got some curves to do, which I'll actually have to use a gouge for, to just put a joining stop cut on, and I have no choice with the gouge but to use the wrong side, so to speak, because that's just the way the gouge is made, and I don't actually have any that have the bevel on the opposite side. I don't think you guys will hear this, but this wood is making a really nice sort of crunching sound as I cut downwards, which is a good thing to hear because it means I'm cutting the wood. With carving you always want to cut the wood, not push it out of the way. No, don't watch a lot of films, and these days, now that I'm streaming and there's creative section to watch, I don't watch any television at all. Webber the Beast, and given that there's not enough hours in the day to do all the things that I do want, I don't tend to go to the cinema either. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't even know what it's about. Obviously it's got something to do with speed. although I'm outlining these rear fingertips, it's not really fantastically important at this point, even if I do want to keep them in. There's a lot of wood to cut off before we get that to the point where those will need to be there. I'm only approximating this curve. Again, it's not important to actually stay to it at this stage. What I'm doing is just outlining, if you like, wood that I want to keep. So as long as I'm outside of the area I want to keep, then I should be okay. And this is just because I'm about to remove a lot of material around the outside that's not wanted. I will refine the curves as we cut material away ultimately when we get towards the bottom, towards the plate on which it sort of all sits. Then I will go back in and tidy up a lot of these lines. Bit of a boring stage, I'm afraid, but a necessary one. And we will keep repeating this as we cut down through the block as well. Cars, crashes, guns. Yeah. Well, if everybody liked the same thing, it would be a boring place to be, wouldn't it? I have a tendency to prefer science fiction myself. Although generally speaking, I just don't watch a lot of stuff in the cinema. It's more just a case of getting up the enthusiasm to do it, I guess, and we don't really have any which are close by. So it's a trip out every time, which of course is part of the fun of the cinema, but I mean, I like the Star Treks, but to be honest, I didn't go and see any of those in the cinema at all. I'm actually trying to think what the last film I did see in the cinema was. Possibly one of the Star Treks. It would have been one of the first series of them, though. It's got me wondering now what I did go see. Now that's all solid, so I need to remember that. Here I'm going to leave a fairly wide area around the tail, and we'll trim that afterwards once we've got down to the correct sort of depth for it. Okay, not far off. You need a fairly decent projector though, Free. I mean, there's nothing like the. I mean, I suppose you need a fairly decent room as well to get a large screen. It's the large screen that does it. I do have a small projector here, but I don't have a decent screen. Oh, you're not that young then, Eddie Folgak. I was thinking, you know, you were maybe 4 or 5 years old. That and totally breaking Twitch rules. That's too far out. Let's do that again. Okay, that's the main part of that done. Now I need a gouge. Yeah, I don't have a wall that's white in order to watch a projector. The way I kind of look at it, AD, is, you know, like, I'm 50 plus, okay? And the way I kind of look at it is, you know, when I became 50, for example, you know, a lot of people going about 50 years, and to me I was sort of only 10 minutes older than I was 10 minutes ago, or a day older than I was yesterday, so yeah. I've got an LED projector. I'm just wondering where it is. A pocket LED projector, but it's not a laser one. I got mine way before lasers were used for that sort of thing. And now I can't find it. It's around somewhere. Trouble is, it's a relatively small thing. It's about the size of a mobile phone, but thicker, and it's got put somewhere. Let's use that one. It doesn't bother me in the slightest, Tilly, from that respect. You know, it's just a number. As I say, you were a second older than you were a second before. And so I just don't let it bother me in the slightest. Really. I need a non-slip mat. Ideally I should clamp it down, but I haven't got anything to clamp it down with here, but that should do the job reasonably well. So now it's a case of removing lots of wood. All sorts of different techniques of doing this as well. There's projectors. Yeah, oh, that's not bad then. Yeah, there's all sorts of techniques, to be honest, for clearing around the edge here and clearing, taking this wood down to the baseboard. One of them is to take the gouge and run around the outside like I started doing then, but it didn't feel quite as nice to do it that way. It was as though the wood was tearing slightly. So just going back to this technique where, having done a stop cut down, you do a diagonal cut to create the edge, and then you've got more space to work with. Now the wood just split there, but the stop cut stopped it running into the rest of the piece. So just make sure I chop it off, and I can see that the wood split on this piece. So it's a good job that the stop cut was there. It did its job. So one of the sort of I hesitate to say rules, but is don't never pull wood off when you're carving. You always make sure you cut it off. That way you don't tear into the wood. And there again, a wood split. But the stop cut has stopped it running into the rest of the piece again. So now you see the value of the stop cut. I mean, at this stage, it wouldn't have been fantastically a problem, of course, because the highest part here is probably around his head. So this, if it just split it on the surface here, we're going to cut that down, but it's kind of start how you mean to go on, really. So if anybody was expecting great big chunks of wood to come off at any one time, you're going to be disappointed. Don't forget, I'm using hand tools here. I'm not using a mallet. Now I'm guessing this wood around here may just split across, so I was just reinforcing that stop cut. Again, this is just an outline again. The real fancy, in quotes, carving comes once we get this outside wood all gone and we're down to actual piece depth, which will take a little while, I'm afraid. If anybody has any particular questions, then feel free to ask them in chat. I'll try my best to take a look, keep looking and answering. And I've just split, just as an example, I've got a stop cut that wasn't deep enough and I've split a little tiny bit of wood there. So I am just reinforcing the stop cut there so I don't do it again. You might see as I'm cutting this down, it's already split, and it's split along the grain. Quite a distance from where the chisel went in as well. Now if I just see what happens if I lift this. Oh no, it broke. Okay. There's a piece here which I was going to see if I could lift up and just see how far it would split, but it chose not to. That's why you have to take notice of which way the grain's running as well, so that you can spot when things like that run away will happen. Yeah, there we go. That bit of that finger's just split away. It's very thin, is that? I may actually have to exaggerate it if I want to keep it at all. And here now the grain direction means I'm getting a little bit of that runaway. Got a knot here in this piece of wood. Basswood isn't so bad, the knots aren't particularly hard. They're a little bit harder than the rest of the wood, and they cut slightly differently because of the wood grain direction, but that's one of the nice things about basswood. There we go. For anybody who's new to the stream, what you're looking at is carving, of course, relief carving. Relief carving is different to figure carving in that effectively this will be sat on a back plate or a presentation board, however you wish to describe it. So you hang these up like a picture, and then the carved piece is in front of the picture frame. So we effectively only carve half the item rather than a full 3-dimensional item. Sort of a 2.5D. I'm using hand tools to do this. I'm using specifically hand-only tools, so it's not. I can't use. There we go. I've just split another piece of that away as well. I was saying these are hand-only tools. I can't use a chisel with these. So I can't use these are chisel. I can't use a mallet with these. I'd destroy the handle. I would need to get a slightly different set of chisels to support using a chisel with them. Using a mallet with them. I'll get the word right in the end. I could also go to power carving, and I can do that either using rotary tools, or indeed actually you can get an adapter for these metal ends, which is a reciprocating action, so I can actually use them like a true chisel, but they're motor driven. Now, basswood being a very fairly soft wood, I wouldn't want to use any particularly powerful things like a mallet or a reciprocating chisel, just because I'd break through the piece and destroy it completely. I'm taking a little bit of care to keep my hands out of the way, but you'll notice I'm not specifically going mad over it. I mean, some of the angles my fingers are in line of direction, but this wood, the way in which this wood cuts, means I'm not using a lot of force, so I'm familiar with just how much force I'm using, and therefore how comfortable I am with having my hands where they are. Explosives! Thank you very much for following, joining the studio. That's very kind of you. Well, I guess you must be enjoying what you're seeing for what to want to follow, and thank you for that. It's not the only thing we do, but it's not the only thing I do, but of course you may already know that. If you didn't, I also do pyrography and scraperboard, and from time to time something called punchcraft as well. Now, whilst we're talking about me doing other things, we also have a few streamers in the chat as well who do things, and they do some amazing things, and they're highly worth watching. A couple of them that I recall exactly is Eddie Fall Guy there, who does chainmail and various iterations and styles and types of chainmail. Anything from what you might think of chainmail to sign banners, dice bags, jewellery, and many other things as well. We also have 3D Bloke in chat as well. He's an airbrush and hairy stick painter, which is an in-joke really amongst airbrush artists. Hairy sticks are normal paintbrushes. It's a piece of wood with hair on the end, a hairy stick. That's if it wasn't that obvious in the first place. But I highly suggest you check both of them out. I know 3D Bloke doesn't broadcast at weekends, so check him out during the week. He generally goes live during the week in about an hour's time from now, but not today. And I don't know if you have a reasonably regular time, Adi. You might like to say if you do. I don't know if we've got anybody else in chat who streams as well. If you do, please make yourself known if you wish to do so. I don't mind. And if you do something that interests me, I'll even follow you myself. I don't mean that in any way derogatory. What it means is I prefer to watch physical art. So that carving, for example, or Adi doing his chainmail. I believe, well, we often have a guy around who does glass blowing, for example, whose name escapes me. And somebody on chat this afternoon was potentially a stone carver. Oh, sorry, it is a stone carver, but he doesn't stream it at the moment. But that sort of thing is what I have my own personal preference to watch. But if you do anything cool, rotary tool, yeah, they're fully intend to one day, Adi. Hope you don't mind me calling you Adi. I will call you Adi Fall Guy if you would like me to. At the moment, I thought it was going to be too noisy, but we proved the other day it's not, because I use an extractor fan, because the rotary tools, especially the high-speed dental tool, is great at turning wood into very fine sawdust, and it's not the sort of stuff you actually want to breathe. So I'd need to use an extractor fan, which is an air filter basically. And that's behind me, but then I can't watch chat. I don't have a lot of space to start to set up a second monitor, even a one driven off the Raspberry Pi. So when we get towards Christmas, I am hoping to be in a new studio, and if I am, then we should have the space to set that up and set the camera up such that I can do some rotary based carving. Not something I've done a lot of, so again this stream is full of firsts, by the way, if anybody's watching doesn't know. The first time I've carved a dragon is this one. You're looking at it, so we shall see whether it's going to be successful or not together. But yeah, Chainmail Wednesdays games on. So there you go. Check out Adi Fall Guy, or Adi. Lost in House, there you go, yet another one. Yeah, I never found it connects, but there again I'm using an iPad 1 when I try and do that Lost, so I end up lurking just because I can't chat. Either that or I dropped to not using the Twitch app but actually using the browser. Where did I get the... interesting. I don't actually know. I've kind of always been creative, but in different ways. As a child, I used to make remote control model aircraft. Well, not make a lot of them, you understand, because that's not the sort of thing you do, is make lots. But and I've been interested in modelling, creating models, that is, type of modelling. And the creativity, well, I then sort of, whilst I've always been interested in art, I got really terrified about it in what in the UK is called junior school. I don't know what it would be in infant school, not junior school. So up to about what's infants? Up to about 6, something like that. I don't actually know. I remember being terrified of art caused by a particular subject. So a lot of my creativity went into more electronics and computing, where you're still creative, you're just creative in a different way. And it wasn't until probably, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 years ago now, that I built my own computer. Well, I've always built my own computer, but I decided I actually wanted to build a water-cooled PC. And I figured whilst I was doing so, I might as well have a purpose painted case, special case if you like. So because I've always been interested in airbrushing, I got an airbrush and did it, and then everything's kind of gone from there. With airbrushing, one of the things I like is black and white painting, and scraperboard is an extension of that, although I've only just taken that up, but that's basically where that came from. That, and seeing some of the fantastic images some other artists have done with scraperboard. Carving itself, I don't know, the pyrography came from the black and white art as well, because pyrography is shades of a colour, whatever colour the wood turns when you start cooking it. I really don't know where the wood carving came from. Possibly interest in 3D modelling, three-dimensional modelling. So, one of the things I'd love to be able to do is create a model railway, just because I like making 3D models. That's about the only thing I can think of. I can remember, I must have obviously discussed it with my wife, because she bought me a set of chisels, which unfortunately I've never actually been able to use. I will do one day. I'm promising myself that I'm going to make them usable, because they were a present. And I've kind of gone from there. So, having been given them as a present, at some point after that I bought this set, and then I started with the rotary carving. I've done glass engraving for quite a long time, probably at least 15 or so years, on and off, nothing particularly regular, just the odd piece, and that was done fully hand. And I've kind of tried to do that using some of the rotary tools, like a Dremel type thing, but they were never fantastically successful, mainly because they're too slow. And so I guess I moved into rotary carving as sort of an extension of rotary based engraving, and being able to combine the two. But to be honest, I don't actually know where it particularly came from. Anyway, as the other thing I was going to say, of course, talking of streamers, is we have Lost in the House, who is a music streamer. She mixes. You can tell I don't understand music, don't you? I listen to stuff I like, and that's about as far as it goes. But yeah, Lost there. I could say a world famous music streamer. I think that'd be fair. I think 3D would agree with that, even if Lost wouldn't. Yeah, Lost in the House. I was thinking this afternoon, because I got an email from them, sort of an advertising email. There's a firm which arranges audiences for television programs. They're called Lost in TV, and it just kind of, yeah. No, I know you. Yeah, okay. I know you mix house music. If you asked me to point at house music, I wouldn't know where to point, and if it jumped up and bit me, that'd be the only time I knew what house was. But and unfortunately, Lost appears to tend to stream a lot when I'm at work, and I can't always get a good stream out of Twitch on anything, never mind the fact that I've got, when I'm at work I have to usually to use an iPad 1, and it doesn't like a lot of streams. So whilst I keep trying and I keep getting notification when Lost goes live, I've never heard her yet, but people that I trust like 3D Bloke and a few of the other people in this stream say she is one of the best in the world. And I'm not just saying that because her name's at the bottom of the screen. Yeah, if a piece of wood doesn't come out of its own accord, it means you've not cut it properly, so don't pull it, cut. That's one of the it's almost a rule of carving. You know, obviously how you carve is entirely up to yourself, but it's one of those what do you call it, rules of thumb, extremely useful tips that you know, you ignore when it's a good idea to ignore, but otherwise you sort of stick with it as a useful thing to remember. Yeah, you know, I'm not sure whether the Amsterdam server's got anything to do with it. I'm not even sure the Amsterdam server's in Amsterdam. It kind of wouldn't surprise me if it's in a data centre in London, and all they're doing is just calling it Amsterdam so that people that's over there tend to use it. I'd have to look at its IP address one of these days. And again, you won't see it, but the let's see if I can show you. If I just bring this up, the wood grain is in this direction here. So when I cut that way, what tends to happen is, as you can see, it splits along the grain. So as I'm cutting it in there, the wood is splitting along the grain line here. So if I didn't have a stop cut at this point here, which you might think if I only need it in front of where I'm cutting, if I didn't have a stop cut further along this thing here, I'd tear out all the way across here. And as I said, at this very first top stage, that kind of doesn't make a great deal of difference. I'm not cutting very deep, but as we get closer down to the piece level, and there's about half an inch or so to go yet, then that would become even more important that those stop cuts were there. Otherwise it would just tear the whole upper part of the work away that you really want it to keep. And just to be sure, I am going to reinforce that stop cut by making it a bit deeper. Right, I've been right around the outside now. So time to remove a bit more wood. Now then, we're going to use a large gouge to do this. I'm going to take it fairly steady because I'm working on this mat. Ooh, that's taking a bit of force. I wonder if this chisel needs sharpening. Yes, it does. I can see I've ripped some of the wood as well. Oh, I see. There's competition for followers, is there? Right. So I say I'm sharpening this. It's not really sharpening. It's more a honing operation, or a polishing operation even. That's what this yellow stuff is here. It's a polishing compound. So I'm just putting a fair bit of polish on there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this knife backwards whilst rotating it, so that I put sharpen or polish off the edge of this tool. Now I've got to hold it at the right angle and press down whilst drawing backwards. And I kind of need to try to keep in a straight line. You don't want to actually be trying to just rock it backwards and forwards. It's really hard to do that cleanly, and you can create flat spots unless you actually have a jig or something to hold it in, which ensures that you get an even angle all the way around. Yeah, it's having an effect, I can see. You won't, no, you're not, there's no way you're going to see that on the camera, but I can see a little tiny edge just right on the edge there. It's what you get with this is like a burr sometimes, and I've got one developing on the edge, which is what I expect because of the way I'm doing this. But that's neat. I haven't seen that before. So generally it doesn't need a great deal. Just draw it backwards. I'm doing this material is a leather strop. Yep. Then what I do is I will turn it over and I'll just put a bit more polishing compound on there. When you do that, as I was rubbing it backwards, it tends to create a burr on the end. It sort of cups up like that, and if you try and cut material with that, it will tend to fold over and create a blunt edge, or it will basically just break off, and then I'll be left with a flat edge. So one of the things we just do now is we just run it the other way up across this profile here, which then straightens out the burr and knocks off any the very fine ends of it, and then we should have quite a sharp edge. So I'll just try that, and then if it's okay I'll put the polishing thing away. Yeah. Now then, that's a heck of a lot better than it was a moment ago. I'll actually, rather than put it away, I'll put it to one side because I'm going to be using it quite frequently, I think. Yeah. There's an expression of chalk and cheese, and that's kind of what that's like. I was using a reasonable amount of force on the first time I tried this. I'm now not. This is where we start to get some of the bigger chunks of wood. Now what I've got to be careful of is when I come here I don't catch the end of that claw. Now whilst it doesn't matter about keeping everything level at this stage, when I get further down I am going to want to have the background flat. And what I've got to be careful of here is if I drive that off the end I'm going to split downwards if I'm not careful. So I am just encouraging it to break off, shall we say. And what I'll try and do is carve in the correct direction along the edge here so that I don't actually rip it off, because I'm cutting now in the direction of the grain and the grain is coming up, then I'm unlikely to split this edge here. What's knocking? Something's... What's doing the banging? It's not that. Oh, it's that. There we go. Is that better? Yep. Again, I'm just trying to be careful as I come over that edge there, that I don't, you know, apply a whole lot of force and ram the chisel over there. In the actual fact I don't even need to do that, because what I can do is, this being an edge, I can just shave it that way. Again, if you've got a piece of wood, don't break it off, cut it off. And anybody who cringed at that statement, you should be ashamed of yourself. So what I'm doing is like a scooping motion. Oops. Yeah. You know what? That's moving a bit too much for my liking. So I happen to have a G-clamp in the house. So I'm going to make use of it. But so I don't mark the wood and I don't mark my desk, I'm going to put a couple of paper pads around it. I don't happen to have a bit of spare wood, but the clamp should help. The paper should help just to stop the clamp marring the wood too much. What I should get actually is a plastic friction clamp, but I don't have one. Now then, I will move the camera so it makes it a bit easier for you guys to see. And again, you need 3 hands sometimes to do this. I could do this with a bench hook as well. So maybe one of these days I'll have to make one. This is probably one of the largest pieces in terms of thickness of wood that I've actually carved as well. And I've tended to use sort of chisel and rotary techniques. The rotary will chew this wood up quite easily. Right, I shall just bring the camera a little bit closer for you. That's better. Not only does that feel safer, it means I can actually put a little bit more force into it. Now you can tell when a chisel's cutting actually on wood rather than ripping it or pushing it out of the way, because it'll be smooth and shiny. If it looks rough, it means it's ripped the wood. I mean, around here it looks kind of rough, and that means it got ripped. I'm hoping also you can hear, if I shut up long enough, the sort of crunching noise that the chisel is making, and that's another indication you're cutting wood and you're cutting it correctly. I also find it just quite a comforting is not quite the right word, but a very satisfying sound. Yeah, I don't happen to have any around that I can use, Lizard, but yes, I would do. That's why I'm using the paper pads. They'll work as reasonably well in this situation, because I'm not clamping it down hard, I'm just holding it against the non-slip. But I would, yeah, I would prefer some sort of load spreader. Now there is a piece of wood that wants to rip. And actually that's because I'm going the wrong way. I mentioned when I had it turned around, I mentioned the grain was coming up, which means if I cut from this direction it's going down, and that's trying to split down deep down into the wood. I'm doing it totally the wrong way around, so I shall leave that divot hanging off there and I'll cut it off properly in a moment. I'll turn the piece around. And good evening, Lizard. Yeah, soft doesn't. Soft. The load spreader is better. So the bit of plywood that you're on about would be a lot better than this. But this it's not about soft. It's about not getting an indentation where the head of this G clamp is, and not damaging my desk underneath as well. It would be better with, you know, the sort of a friction clamp. They're like a gun style. You just, you know, rapidly close them up, because they generally have quite a large spreader head on them. Yeah, it is a delicious sound. Mr. Adup, good evening, welcome to the studio. Thank you for joining us. And how are you this evening? I say evening because it's evening in the UK. Of course, where you are, you may well be just be in early morning, so excuse me if I have the tenses wrong. I actually love this bit about this part of carving, when you have to take the background off and you're cutting wood like that, which is just such a nice sound. Now I have to be careful here because I've got no stop cut. Okay, let's turn this around a bit and do some down that edge. Using the clamp will actually get harder as I do this, just purely because that's going to be the only bit of wood that's left that's sort of clampable. This is to some extent, I say some extent, where carver's vice might actually help. The piece is thick enough to support it for a while, but the carver's vice is generally sits on sort of it's like a ball head that you get on, or sometimes on tripods, and you bolt it or screw it to the bottom of your piece of wood, and then you can move it in any sorts of directions that you like to do the carving. With relief carving, when you end up with about a 1/4 of an inch thick base, you haven't got a lot of space to put screws in, but and also if you're a long way off centre of where it's fastened, depending on what it is, you've got a danger of breaking off the wood. So you can get big plates for them, and with sort of little tiny screws, and if you put enough in, then they'll hold. But I will probably end up resorting to just holding it by hand, but by then I'll have the majority of the wood off with a bit of luck. Actually, I've got to be careful. This edge is quite sharp. It's a nice clean cut, and I've got to be careful not to cut myself on it. Now you haven't got quite as much of a sound in this direction because the sound comes mainly from cutting cross grain. The wood, actually, just in this area, the grain sort of goes down for a little bit and comes up. Don't quite know why, but I can feel it when I'm cutting with a chisel. Been a little bit wary because I've only got a small stop cut here. It's a bit funny in a way. You pay whatever it is for a nice big block of wood like this, and then you throw most of it away in little bits. As I get down a lot further, I will actually switch to an even bigger but flatter chisel to do this with. It won't be a true flat one, it will be a gouge. The purpose of the gouge, I don't know if you can see them, it slightly curves up, and the reason is so that you can go into the wood, and at any time you can just push down gently on the handle and the tool will actually rise up out of the wood, so you can scoop it up. Now, if you do it with a flat chisel, it's really hard to come up and cut across the wood, and most of the time you end up just driving deeper. Is this the first time using these tools? No, I've had them now for about 2.5 years. Lizard Sill. I've had them about as long as I've had the pyrography equipment. I've not done a great deal of hand carving. I've probably done about probably about 5 pieces in total, and some of those were mixed using the rotary stuff. and I've only just recently started trying to do some 3D carving, which I've got the start of a cat there, which I'm just working my way down into. As you do with most things, you start, as a few people will know, you kind of cut the outline and you just keep cutting the outline and cutting down into it. But I'm just starting with that, and I just started with a figure. Figures are really hard to do, so I find them really hard to do. I'm sure other people find them really easy. But to work with those, I also have a couple of knives as well. So I doing the 3D carving is mainly using the knives rather than the chisels, but because I don't like using the chisels with a handheld piece. Knives are okay, you can control them. But when I do those, when I do the handheld pieces, I use a Teflon glove, and this has got Teflon fibres woven into it, and they're resistant to either stabbing with a wide chisel, not with a narrow one, but basically they're resistant to cutting. So you tend not to cut yourself with a knife, and with a wide chisel like this, you tend not to stab yourself either, because they resist the cutting motion. There's an edge on this chisel. She's reflecting back at me. Yeah. I'm just looking at this. I can see a reflection. Either there's a very slight nick in the end of this chisel, or there's a slight burr on it. I'm not quite sure which. But now I've had them for a while. I'm not greatly practiced with them, which means I'm likely to make mistakes in doing things. But of course, that's kind of the way I learn how to do things, by making mistakes. Right, I do need to increase those stop cuts at some point. At this stage I can cut away from the wood that I want to keep. At some point I'm going to have to come in this way against the wood I want to keep, in order to take away the hill that I'm creating. If you see the light wobble a little bit, it's because it's an angle poised lamp and the desk is rocking a little bit. Yes, I get quite a lot of practice at making mistakes, Lost. Of course, the problem isn't making mistakes, it's when you don't learn how to correct them. That's the problem. And that comes into all walks of life. One thing with sharp chisels is you can steer them quite easily. If you've got blunt chisels, that's a very difficult thing to do. You can create really nice backgrounds like this as well. This is sort of one where it's just scooped out. You get little scoops, It can be quite a pleasing background. Generally speaking, with a relief carving, you tend to want to have them as flat as possible, but it is one way, I guess, of adding some interest to the background of a relief carved piece. Now you will have to excuse me if I do tend to be silent somewhat while I'm doing this. Please remember I'm working with really sharp tools and I don't want to cause any damage or injury. Plus, as I already mentioned, this is kind of a favourite bit about carving, is you know, pulling these large pieces off and the noise of just the chisel makes in cutting the wood. And I kind of just get lost in it. You know, there's another lost for Lost in House. She Devil, good evening. Welcome to the studio. And yes, it is a learning tool, and if you accept it as that, you'll learn a heck of a lot. I'm sorry to hear you're not feeling so well, She Devil. I hope you feel better soon. Yes, I could indeed, Ediful Guy. That's a possibility. It's, you know, it's in some ways it's like the rose which we carved, this we carved on stream, and I've never actually painted a carved piece before. It was suggested on the stream. We tried it with sort of basic paint, if you like, nothing particularly fancy, a little bit of shading, but you know, it's different. Whether it's made it better or worse, I wouldn't like to say. It's just different. And so yes, you're perfectly right. You could actually do mix any of these. I mean, there's literally no reason why you can't, yeah, airbrush it or do anything else on the background as well. You can even take a heavy stick to it. Yeah. The sound hurts to hear. You mean you don't like the sound, like nails on a blackboard, or the sound is affecting your ears, shall we say? Unfortunately, can't do much about it. If it's the sound that you don't like, you know, like fingers on a blackboard, you know, and some people do worry about the wood. The sound that you hear means that the wood is being cut correctly with a really sharp blade, and therefore you're doing the best for the wood. It's the mechanism by which I, as well as the feel, it's the mechanism by which I can tell when the tool is getting blunt, and blunt being a relative term, because the sound changes. Sorry, I'm getting carried away here. Ah, okay. Felskapad, good evening. Welcome to the studio. Nice to see you here. Yeah, I find it quite relaxing as well. It's sound is an amazing thing. I was doing punchcraft earlier, and the sound of that I find relaxing. It just seems that a lot of the sounds in a lot of hobbies just is half of what makes them fun to do. Oh, I could make some comments which I might think were humorous, but probably aren't, so I shan't. But I hope you feel better soon, She-Devil. I was kind of getting carried away just then, smoothing this out, because you can, even though this is a round bottomed chisel, and it naturally creates a valley when you cut with it, you can actually get a remarkably smooth, flat base using it, and just shaving off the high spots, but you don't need to do that for a long time yet. At this stage I should really turn the piece around, so I'm going to do that. Well, as long as we stay with the favourite sounds, at least that should help. I from time to time get migraines. You could say suffer from migraines, and sometimes just something like a favourite sound like that is enough to just take my mind off it, and I can then sort of get on with things, or get on with life, so to speak. Just thought I'd let you enjoy the sound of that. Oh dear. If you continue to have a sensitivity to both sound and light, then it may be worth visiting a medical practitioner tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to do some stop cuts around here so I can get a bit closer. And already, you know, the desk is starting to fill up with plenty of wood chips. As I mentioned, it's a for quite some time now. It's a round of creating stop cuts like this, channeling, cutting up to the stop cut, and then cutting the background down. we have this piece of wood's an inch thick, so we've at least something like about, well, at least half an inch, if not an inch of wood to go through. Sorry, not an inch, 3/4 of an inch. I sincerely hope I don't go through an inch of wood. That would be bad. Now then, rather than unclamp that, I'm going to come at this from an unusual angle. Which will save a bit of time on stream as well. I think this chisel could do with a little bit of a I'll call it sharpening. I guess I am making it sharp, but most people think when you say sharpening they think of using whetstones and stuff like that. And it confuses people when I then get out what looks to be polishing stuff. Well, see, because I'm polishing, and polishing does remove a layer of whatever it is you're polishing. You know, you tend not to notice it, but all this black that's on here is the blade. It's come from whatever blade I've been sharpening. Yeah. Yes, it's a dragon. It's thank you. At least I'm doing something right if it looks like a dragon. What this is one of my favourite authors is Anne McCaffrey, or was Anne McCaffrey should I say. Unfortunately she is no longer with us, although her son now writes books. But what she wrote was a series of books set on science fiction books. These is written set on a planet called Pern, and to overcome, without giving story away, but to overcome a menace, a fairly natural menace on the planet, the people have formed a relationship with dragons. They're fire-breathing dragons, and the fire is used to help vanquish the menace. And that's kind of where the dragon bit comes from. But what you of course have is you get various artists that will create book covers, and one of Anne McCaffrey's most favourite illustrators that created covers for her is a guy called Michael Wheland, and she was one of his he was one of her favourites because of the image that he created of the dragons that looked as like she wanted them to look like. He kind of got what it was she was saying about them. And the dragons that he does, and they don't particularly look fierce, but they do look sort of like they can handle themselves, shall we say. But they don't have long necks, they don't have scales, they don't look menacing in any way, they don't look like, don't have lizard tongues and things like that, which is often how dragons are portrayed. And I just happen to like his illustrations of the dragons, and this is kind of fan art in that respect, because this is, this was the outline of this was traced from one of his images. The carving's all mine, and so are the mistakes, but that's why we're doing a dragon. And of course the stream helped me choose which one to do this afternoon, even if I very nearly did do the wrong one. If AD Fall Guy hadn't have told me, we would have ended up with still one of Michael Wheland's dragons, and still the same dragon but a different picture. And if anybody's interested, this is I can't actually remember which story this one is from, because the title of the piece is called We're World, but I can't remember which book it's from now. But this is Ruth, the white dragon, and he Ruth is a he, and he's unique to dragonkind. He's the only white dragon. That's quite alright, She-Devil. I was about to say I've read all the Pern books. I haven't actually. I've read all the books that Anne McCaffrey wrote. At a point in her life, she was finding it difficult to write books, just physically difficult, and she started collaborating with her son, Todd McCaffrey, and they started writing collaborations on Pern, and then Todd took over completely. I've actually not read any of those. I moved on to other books, shall we say, and I just haven't got back into reading those, because they came quite a lot afterwards, after the last one that I read of Anne McCaffrey wrote herself. And it's just pure time. It's not that I don't like Todd or anything like that. I haven't read any of. I've read the collaborations, and they just read just like any of Anne's books. But I've not read any of his of his own, just because I haven't got around to it yet. That's broken, or will break. Yeah, it's actually split already. Yeah. I'm going to have to be real careful with those tips when we get lower. I may even actually have to leave them off. We'll try and make sure we carve them quite a bit wider, and then maybe they might survive. Because I'm cutting towards a a very narrow piece. I was just shaving it off. What I ought to do, of course, is not cut towards it but cut away from it. That way I don't have any chance of overrunning. No. That's going to be really, really fragile, is that? It may be something that I don't actually put on. I don't have the skills, shall we say, to deal with it. By the way, you may occasionally see me sort of waggling the chisel backwards and forward. Nothing particularly wrong with that at all. It's just it creates a slight slicing motion, which sometimes helps you cut through the wood. You may get some people that say you shouldn't do that, but there's no particular reason why you shouldn't do that. It's just that, generally speaking, you try and cut in a straight line, which is always pushing, rather than if you're waggling, you're pushing at an angle, which is not always a good idea. But sort of for beginners' purposes, you're always taught to just cut with a pushing motion. And like most things, or like a lot of things that are beginners are taught, they're taught that for safety reasons. And once you understand your tools, you understand what you're doing, there are certain rules that become advisory rather than mandatory. Okay. Just Jessup, good evening. Nice to see you back in the studio. You've missed out the pyrography. And I haven't done matchstick stuff for a long time. My grandfather used to do matchstick stuff. Binug, thank you very much for joining the followers of the studio. That's most kind of you. Thank you very much. I'm glad you're enjoying what you're looking at. I am hoping to have a 3D pen delivered at some point in the future. So you may see that done on stream. I tell you what I do have as well is a small laser cutter, and by small I mean small. I mean about that size. And it'll cut cardboard and foam. But one of the things it will actually do is it's got the ability to vary its laser power, so it can actually create images. But that's a kit to build, so I don't know, maybe later this year. I've got nowhere to put it, so I don't really want to build it now. It's in its box, and whilst it's in its box it's significantly smaller, even though it's not particularly large anyway. But maybe later this year we'll have a look at building that, and then you might see some laser work. Pyrography. That suggests you don't know what pyrography is, just Jessup, and I'll assume that you don't, and I'll explain in a moment. Darky Dark Killer, good evening again, welcome back to the studio. Yes, so would I. It was actually done as a Kickstarter, and I am waiting for it to be delivered, shall we say, and it's late, but you know, it's just have to put up with it, but it will hopefully it'll turn up at some point this year, and when it does, I got it because it looked to be a cool thing to just play about with and create something like, you know, sculpturing-ish type things, and so we'll see it. So soon when it does arrive. In the meantime, actually thinking about it, if you want to see somebody using a 3D pen, check out Gluten-Free Gamer. I know he's just got one, a 3D doodler. It's a 3 doodler. And he was doing some things on stream earlier today. So check him out and have a look. Okay. Pyrography. It's a Latin or Greek based word, made up of two elements, the pyro and the graphy. Pyro refers to fire and graphy refers to writing, so a literal translation is fire writing. But as you will often hear me say on the stream, I'm not using fire and I'm not often writing. So it sort of translates as to making images using heat. And what I do is I use a specific tool. I use a specific machine with a tool, and so I have what looks like a pen connected to the electricity supply. This is a very low voltage, 1.5 volts. So in theory I can touch this whilst it's operating quite safely, because 1.5 volts is the same as an AA battery. Though whilst it's operating, it's safe to touch it from a voltage point of view. That tip easily exceeds 200 degrees. That's Celsius. So I'm not touching it whilst it's running. But all it literally does is use this like a pen, and there are different tips as well. And what it does is it forces or causes the resin or the sap in the wood to come out of the wood fibres, and then it basically cooks it and turns it a brown colour. The longer it's cooked, the more brown it becomes, and so you end up with different shades of brown, and you can create images with it. I'll show you one. I'll show you a couple actually. Yeah, get to advertise art. So here's one that was done on stream of a pussycat. This pussycat's called Junior. That's pyrography. It's looking bit largely. Let me see if I can move the light so it's not quite. Unfortunately, I'm trying to get this so you can see it reasonably well. It's sort of largely black and white, but there are a fair number of shades in there. Another one. Let's have a look. I've got another pussycat around here, so I'll just show you a few examples. There's another one, very similar, but it doesn't have to be animals. We've got one there of a World War II bomber. Again, using multiple shades there, you can see more clearly that there's more than one shade used in that. And one that these are practice pieces, which are either on brown wood, but there's an image which may be familiar to whoever was watching the stream this afternoon. There's another practice piece where you're using multiple shades of the brown to create an illusion of not only colour but shade and what have you. And yes, She Devil is correct. There is information below the stream window about pyrography, as also you will find about the carving and the scraper board as well. And I guess I really ought to put one there to do with the punchcraft as well, now that I seem to have done that a fair few times on stream. And by the way, if anybody's listening has any questions about any of those, feel free to ask them. You don't have to wait until I'm doing that particular craft to ask any questions. I also do quite a few other things which have not appeared on stream yet. Airbrushing is one of them, like 3D Bloke, who is an excellent airbrush artist. You guys should check him out and follow him if you're at all interested in airbrushing, or even some of the stuff doing with a manual brush. And I also do, as I mentioned, do some glass engraving, which again I'm not doing on stream until I can get the space to do it, basically. I occasionally do some rug making, cross stitch, which you probably won't see me do on stream. I think that's a little bit too slow and art form for to be of interest for people to watch. Making rugs, two different styles of rug making. And what else? I keep finding things. I make models. I make 1/14 scale trucks, or at least I've got a couple. I also make a tank, or made a tank. It's half finished over there. I might finish that on stream one of these days, because this streaming, like, you get through a lot of stuff, and it's amazing just what you can do, and people are interested to watch. What else do I do? I don't know. I've got that many things I'm interested in. Link whom, Darky Killer? 3D Bloke? There you go. Thank you very much, She Devil. Generally speaking, by the way, if you know somebody's Twitch name, you can fairly easily find their channel just by the twitch.tv/whatever their Twitch name is, as long as you've been given their full name, and then you can generate the link just like that. Useful trick that not after it sounds a lot of people don't seem to know. Okay, normally I don't like working towards myself, and I'm kind of scooted around so I'm not, but it still looks a little bit iffy, does this, if you're sort of familiar with the rule of don't cut towards yourself. I am actually still fully behind this tool, and there's almost I'm using my thumb here, so that if there were any chance of it trying to come towards me, my thumb is stopping it. LMC 1337, thank you very much for joining us in the studio. That's most kind of you. Glad to see you, and I'm glad that you're enjoying the content that you're watching now at the moment. So I'm just, as I said earlier, I'm creating stop cuts here so that the wood, which basswood does actually split quite easily. That's one of the things that makes it a nice wood for carving, is the fact that the wood cuts fairly easily, and that is because, if you like, the adhesion between the layers of grain is relatively weak, and so the sharp blade of the chisel slips along fairly easily. But that very same characteristic means the wood also splits very easily. And so the stop cut here is really important. Otherwise, you will split off fairly large chunks of wood that destroy your piece. Earlier, when I was doing the rose that I showed not so long ago, which was done on ash, that's somewhat a harder wood, and whilst it would still split, its tendency to do so was towards the more extreme actions, so you had to work hard to split it. Whereas here with basswood, it doesn't take any effort whatsoever, which is why you're seeing me sort of teasing this particular bit of wood off rather than ripping it. The rule, if you like, if you want another rule of carving, is you never pull wood off, you cut it off. So if it's not coming off, don't pull, keep cutting your stop cuts until it comes off of its own accord. Oh, I apologise. Perhaps that's me, as we're getting quite late actually, and I will be stopping the stream shortly. I sometimes have a tendency to let my voice go quieter and maybe not speak as clearly. AD Fall Guy, yes, have a good night. That's getting to be a good idea. I'm certainly getting towards the good idea of having either some more tea or some cold water, which I've got down the side of me here, and it's kind of calling to me. Not only that, I do have a fresh cream chocolate and cherry what's it called, muffin, which is yeah I'm sure some of you know just what that's calling and doing. So I'm just going to do a little bit more just around here, and then unfortunately it will be the time to wrap up for this evening. I think I'll just go on until about past. Normally, you see, what I would have done is about half an hour. 3D bloke who's around somewhere in the stream and was linked a moment ago. He generally starts broadcasting round about 10 o'clock at night. That's about half an hour ago, and I enjoy watching his stream. So it works out kind of nice that after about 2 to 2.5 hours streaming, I need a rest, and he starts streaming at about the same time, so we kind of hand off, which is quite neat from my point of view, because then I can go have a rest and watch an excellent streamer at work. In actual fact, I have a problem because I enjoy watching creative streams almost exclusively. I can't remember the last time I watched a stream that wasn't in creative. Oh yes, I can, because I watch Train Simulator during the week, but that's after I finish streaming as well. Matt Pendleton, I watch him stream. Amy Tough, thank you for joining the studio. That's nice of you to follow. Thank you very much. But apart from that, there's just so many interesting streamers, and quite a few of them are American, of course, or at least that sort of time zone. and you guys, American guys, are just starting to stream as it's time to go to bed, and or time for me to go to bed. And there's so many interesting stuff on that I just can't keep up. So, you know, if you're not being creative a lot, I encourage all of you to take a look around. There's some really excellent streamers doing all sorts of really interesting arts. I have a preference for myself for watching what I would call physical art, which is people doing things. Well, they're all doing things, but you know, this is a physical art. 3D with his airbrush is a physical art. There's a guy that does glass blowing or glass modelling. So he's using liquid glass, big torch, and heating it up and things. You've got people doing 3D printing. You've got people like Eddie Fall Guy, who's nipped off to bed now, who does chainmail. Cannon Bear, who does some drawing and pyrography as well. And you've got the people doing CJ. I can never remember his actual title. He said to call him CJ. He does clay modelling, sculpting rather, and there's some wax clay guy out there, Paxel, I think. So there's a whole range of people, and I strongly encourage you to take a look around. It can be absolutely fascinating. And of course there's all the people who do digital art as well. There is nothing wrong with that at all. I do some myself. I've got a workstation just to the right of me there, and I enjoy doing that. I just prefer to watch physical art, but I do sometimes. There's a couple of the digital artists that I do watch, so you know, there's a lot to see. In fact, sometimes you might, I don't know if she's around at the moment, but Bubbles the Monkey, have I got that right? I'm now worried I've got a name wrong. Who does bead art? You know, using things like perler beads you might have heard of, but there's lots of manufacturers. She does some excellent things using those beads. Okay, that doesn't want to cut because of a change in the grain somewhere around there, and so the fact it doesn't want to cut is telling me don't cut it. It means turn the chisel around and do it from a different direction, and that's not very comfortable either. That's cutting down. The grain goes down at that point, and it's trying to go down, so I want to come in from the other side, otherwise I'd split the wood. There we go. I thought I'd just keep quiet there and let you enjoy the sound of the wood being cut. Yeah, I I very rarely use Photoshop. I tend to, except for Photoshop like stuff, cutting and cropping and things like that, but for art I tend to use Painter more than that. How have you learned all this tree work and stuff? By doing what you see me do, Dark Killer mainly. When I first got the chisels, I got them as part of a kit, and there was a very rudimentary, the kit. It was a piece of basswood with a couple of leaves on it, and there was a little bit of instruction about how to do it, which helped because it taught a little thing about the grain and why the chisel sometimes doesn't want to cut, and what you should do is not cut, turn it around, go from another direction. But essentially that pyrography, the scraper board, in fact all of the things, even the airbrushing, I've taught myself. Okay, I've watched some people on the internet do things like the airbrushing and the pyrography, and to some extent carving as well, but I'd watch them anyway just because it's interesting to watch. So yeah, I've picked up some of the techniques from them perhaps, but you then have to apply them yourself and learn them that way. So it really is all self-taught. I've not been to any classes or anything like that. You're welcome, She-Devil. It's yeah, I like the sound of it as well, that's why I shut up. But yeah, so it's all the art is just try it and see. I was about to say I'm not afraid to fail. That's true, but misleading. I'm not afraid to fail. If I mess this up, well, I've messed it up. What I do get is afraid to start. So I mean, that's one thing the stream helps with, because I needed, I said I'd carve a piece, so I needed to carve a piece. So I had to find something that I liked, and this is the image that got picked, and the stream helped me do that. And I'm going ahead of it, and I'm making mistakes as I go along, and I'll probably either fail to keep these fingers on the end or the nails on the end, and if I do, well, they'll get cut off and the image will not look quite the same, but it will still be a nice image. But as if I wasn't on the stream, I'm not sure I can do that. Am I going to break it? And I'd be procrastinating, and I probably wouldn't start. I'd keep the wood until I had something worthy of being done, and of course worthy of being done means I think I can finish it. So I probably never start, and the wood would just sit there, and I keep going, I'd love to carve something, but I can't think of something to carve. And actually that's the hardest thing I've found in all of my art, is getting the inspiration to do something. There's lots of images I see in my head that I'd love to be able to do, and I'm just afraid to start. I like, for example, a Scania truck, an articulated truck. I love articulated trucks because of the wheels and it bends in the middle. Something about that, don't ask me why, but I just like the way the trailer follows the truck, and that's partly why I've got a dirty great big model of one sat behind me. It'll be upside down, but there's a model there of an articulated truck. I'll turn the camera upside down, you can see, there you go, make you all dizzy. But there's a Scania model truck, and I'd love to sort of draw, paragraph, carve an image of that. Just why not? UK Fight Club, thank you very much for joining the studio. That's most kind of you. Glad to see you here and that you like what you're looking at. Yeah, and I'd love to sort of put that, let's say, a carving on wood, but I'm just so afraid to start. I just can't get the inspiration, if you like, as just what to put down on the wood or whatever it is. But anyway, what do I do for a living? I work for a telecommunications company. I handle data and data analysis. Well, that's what I'm doing at the moment. My career has spanned a whole range of things, but at the moment I look at data and look at numbers and look for correlations and have fun, and it is fun. Just finding unusual answers in information that you didn't think went together, which is kind of creative in a way. It strikes me as odd. A lot of what I've done at work is kind of creative. It's just a different style of creation, but it is creative. But as Dark Killer there mentioned, it is time for me to finish the stream. I've got this lot to tidy up and throw the bits away and get the vacuum out and tidy up. But I want to thank everybody this evening who's been watching, who've joined the stream, joined the studio, as it seems like I'm calling it these days, and are following and looking forward to seeing you on future streams. If there is anybody else that would like to obviously see more of this carving, which will go on for the rest of this week at least, or any of the other arts and crafts, then please follow me. The button's at the bottom just below the window, and then hopefully Twitch will let you know when I go live. And if you don't trust it, as I'm sure many people are not doing so, you're also quite welcome to follow me on Twitter. That information is also below the window, the video window, but it's at Zaragon Art. And just to give you fair warning, I don't tweet a great deal. In fact, about the only thing I do tweet is going live, so you won't be inundated. And I stream roughly at this. Well, roughly stream. Can you roughly stream? I stream 7 nights a week at the moment, subject to any other personal commitments. And that's generally from 8 PM in the UK. That's 1900 GMT, or to pinch a line from 3D Block, if you count backwards, about 2.5 hours roughly from the time wherever it is you are now. That's about the time I start. Sometimes it's a little earlier, sometimes it's a little late, and occasionally you may catch an ad hoc stream on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon if I'm doing a little bit of art. Then I may well come live, and you might see some different things like punchcraft or making a rug or something like that. Yeah, apart from that, thank you very much. And LMC 1337, the thing I've learnt from streaming is get started, dig the chisel in, touch the pyro tool to the wood, scrape that little bit of black off. And Poke Ranger 69, he's the guy, by the way, that does the glass blowing, so take a look at him. It's an amazing art. Since I've been a kid, whenever I've seen glass blowing or the glass modelling done in shops, I've spent hours stood in front of that glass screen that's always there, watching the guy do things, and come out with the red spots in front of my eyes because of it. But maybe that's why I've got glasses on now. But anyway, everybody, thank you very much for watching this evening, and I hope you all have an amazing evening, day, morning, whatever time it is, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Cheers.